Boston's winter didn't whisper, it struck. The wind swept down Tremont Street with a sharpness that made the skin sting and the lungs burn. Snow had crusted into brittle patches along the curb, and on a forgotten metal bench pressed against a brick wall, a woman sat still, her frame curled protectively around two sleeping children. Clara Evans kept her arms tight, not from fear of losing them, but to hold in what little warmth their bodies shared. The twins' heads rested against her chest, their small breaths leaving faint clouds in the air. A bus rumbled past without stopping. A man in a heavy coat glanced their way, then kept walking. Her phone buzzed against her palm, the battery icon already in the red. She scrolled to a number she'd memorized long before life had gone off the rails. Sophie, not family, but the closest thing she had left. Pride had a voice, and it whispered not to send the message. Hunger and cold spoke louder. She typed with stiff fingers. "Can we stay with you tonight? Just until morning. The kids are freezing." She pressed send, unaware her numb thumb had slipped, altering one digit in Sophie's number. 4 blocks away, in the polished quiet of a glass high-rise, Ethan Cole stepped out of a conference room into the near-empty hall. Midnight meetings were nothing new, but tonight's had been the kind that left tension sitting in his shoulders. The building's heating made the air too warm, too still. His phone vibrated. Expecting another finance update, he glanced at the screen. The message stopped him in place. "Can we stay with you tonight, just until morning? The kids are freezing." A location tag blinked beneath the text, auto-generated, and above it, the name Clara. The years between now and the last time he saw her compressed into a single visceral jolt. 6 years without a word. No call, no explanation, just an empty space where their future had been. He looked up from the phone, his voice sharp, to Tremont Street, now. The driver didn't ask why. The bench appeared under a cone of yellow light, the air around it shifting with the motion of passing cars. Ethan stepped out before the car had fully stopped, his shoes crunching over frozen grit. Clara looked up. The wind carried the silence between them. Ethan's gaze flicked to the twins, their faces pressed into her coat, then back to hers. "Are they warm enough?" His tone was steady, but there was no mistaking the edge in it. "We'll manage," she said, tightening the blanket. "You should go." He took one step closer. "Let me help, just for tonight." She opened her mouth to refuse, but the girl in her arms coughed, a thin, dry sound that cut through her resolve. Clara's jaw shifted. She nodded once, slow. They rode in silence. Heat blasted from the vents, turning the frost on their clothes into a faint dampness. The twins leaned against her, breathing evenly. Ethan kept his eyes on the road ahead, his grip on the armrest measured but firm. At the secondary penthouse, he opened the door without speaking. Clara stepped in, scanning the space. Not for luxury, but for safety. "Guest room's down the hall," he said. "Oh, it's warmer there." Her gaze met his for a brief charged moment. "Thank you, just for tonight." "Just for tonight," he repeated. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, spilling warm light into the marble hallway. Ethan stepped out first, his breath still sharp from the cold. Clara followed slowly, one arm cradling her sleeping daughter, the other guiding her son, who clung to her coat. "This way," Ethan said quietly, leading them down the hall to a corner suite. He swiped his key card, the door unlocking with the muted click. The room was spacious but understated, a deliberate choice for a guest space. The hum of the central heating filled the silence. Clara sat the little girl on the sofa, then crouched to unlace her son's boots, her movements efficient but careful. Ethan hesitated near the doorway. In 6 years, he had imagined 100 ways they might meet again. None of them looked like this. Her in a worn coat, two children pressed against her like she was the only safe place in the world. "There are clean towels in the bathroom," he said, his voice low. "I'll have some food sent up." She didn't look at him. "Thank you, but just tonight." Ethan nodded, though the words landed heavier than she meant them to. A few minutes later, room service arrived. Steaming bowls of chicken soup, bread still warm from the oven, mugs of hot cocoa crowned with melting marshmallows. The children's eyes lit up. Clara murmured a quiet, "Eat slowly," but her gaze stayed fixed on the window where snow swirled in the amber streetlight. Ethan stood by the dining table, hands in his pockets, pretending to check his phone. But his attention kept drifting back to the way Clara smoothed her daughter's hair without thinking, to the tiny cough her son tried to hide. When the children finished, Ethan gathered the empty dishes and set them by the door. Clara rose, adjusting the blanket over the sofa where the twins now curled together. "You can take the bedroom," Ethan said. "It's warmer." "I'll stay here." Her tone was final. Ethan paused, searching for something to say that wouldn't push her further away. In the end, he simply nodded. "Good night, Clara." She didn't answer, but as he turned to leave, he heard her whisper almost to herself, "Good night." The first light of morning slipped through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting pale gold across the living room. Clara stirred on the sofa, a blanket draped over her. Her daughter was still asleep, her small hand curled against Clara's side. The boy sat cross-legged on the rug, quietly flipping through a picture book he must have found on the coffee table. Ethan was already in the kitchen, sleeves rolled to his forearms, pouring coffee into a mug. The smell of toast and scrambled eggs drifted through the air. He glanced over as Clara sat up, her hair falling in loose strands. "There's breakfast," he said simply, setting plates on the counter. She hesitated before joining him, the children trailing close. The boy reached for a slice of toast, his eyes darting between Ethan and his mother. "You don't have to do this," Clara said, her voice low but steady. Ethan met her gaze. "It's just breakfast." They ate in relative silence, punctuated by the clink of cutlery and the occasional giggle from the twins when the boy tried to make his sister laugh. Ethan found himself watching those moments, the easy rhythm between them, the way Clara's eyes softened when she looked at her children, and how quickly they hardened again when she caught him looking. When the plates were cleared, Ethan checked his watch. "I have a meeting in 2 hours. I can arrange for a driver to take you anywhere you need." Clara straightened. "We'll be fine. We won't stay longer than today." A quiet beat hung in the air before Ethan nodded. "At least let me give you something for the kids. Warm clothes, groceries, no strings." She opened her mouth to refuse, but stopped when her son coughed, a dry, rasping sound. Her eyes flickered with concern. "I'll take him to see a doctor," Ethan offered immediately. Clara hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Only the doctor, that's it." A short while later, they stepped into the cold again. The city was quieter in the morning, the snow crunching beneath their shoes. Ethan walked a half step ahead, holding the clinic's glass door open for them. Inside, the warmth was almost startling. A nurse ushered them to the pediatric wing. As she took the boy's temperature, she smiled at Ethan. "Dad, you can fill out the forms here." Clara's head snapped up. Ethan had taken the clipboard. His pen paused for a second before he wrote his name in the blank space for parent or guardian. Clara watched, her eyes flickering with unease. When the nurse walked away, Ethan handed the form back. But as the boy was led into the examination room, Clara's mind had already begun to drift back to the years apart, to the truth she had buried, and to the man now standing beside her, the one who had once promised to stay by her forever. The pediatrician, a woman in her 40s with a calm voice, listened intently to the boy's breathing through her stethoscope. "It's a mild respiratory infection," she said, jotting notes on the chart. "We'll start him on medication and keep him hydrated. He should be fine in a few days." Clara let out a breath that she didn't realize she'd been holding. Ethan stood beside her, his hands in his coat pockets, his gaze fixed on the boy sitting quietly on the exam table. When the prescriptions were ready, Ethan took them without a word and paid at the front desk. Outside, the air was sharp, snowflakes drifting lazily from a white sky. "I'll drive you to the pharmacy," he said. Clara shook her head. "We can walk. It's close." Ethan didn't argue, just fell into step beside her. The twins shuffled along, the girl clutching a small plush rabbit, the boy leaning lightly against his mother's side. At the pharmacy, Ethan handed the pharmacist the prescriptions, while Clara browsed the small shelf of children's thermometers. He returned with a small paper bag and, without looking at her, asked, "Do you have enough for food this week?" Clara didn't answer immediately. "We'll manage." "That's not what I asked." Her eyes flicked to him, guarded. "We'll be fine, Ethan." They walked back in silence. As they reached the penthouse, Clara started to gather the children's things. "We'll leave this afternoon," she said, Ethan's brow furrowed. "Where will you go?" "That's not your concern." "It is," he replied, his voice low but steady. "Whether you like it or not, it is." Before she could respond, the boy began coughing again. Clara crouched down, rubbing his back. Ethan knelt too, mating her eyes. "Stay at least until he's better." Clara hesitated, torn between pride and practicality. Finally, she gave a short nod. 2 days? No more." Ethan stood, a flicker of relief in his expression. 2 days. That night, the twins slept soundly in the guest bedroom. Clara sat on the edge of the sofa, watching the snow fall beyond the glass. Ethan returned from his study holding 2 mugs of tea. He set one in front of her. "Clara," he began, his tone softer now. "6 years ago. Why didn't you tell me?" Her fingers tightened around the mug. "Because it wouldn't have changed anything. Not with your family." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "You don't know that." She looked at him then, her eyes steady. "I know exactly what they're capable of." For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, the city lights blurred in the snow, and somewhere between them, unspoken truths hung heavy, waiting to be faced. The next morning, sunlight spilled weakly through the tall windows, casting pale streaks across the living room floor. Clara emerged from the guest room, her hair loosely tied, carrying a tray with 2 small bowls of oatmeal for the twins. Ethan was already in the kitchen pouring coffee. He looked up. "How's he feeling?" "Better," she said, setting the bowls on the table. "No fever overnight." "That's good." He hesitated, then added, "I cleared my morning. Thought I'd take you all somewhere warm for a bit. The aquarium, maybe." Clara's brows knit slightly. "We don't need a field trip, Ethan. They just need rest." "They've been stuck inside for days," he said. "A little distraction might help." And he paused, searching her expression. "So might a change of air for you." She didn't reply, just continued setting spoons beside the bowls. The twins soon padded out, still in their pajamas, giggling softly at some private joke. Ethan watched as Clara gently coaxed them into eating, her patience unwavering. After breakfast, he left the room for a moment and returned with 2 small winter coats, brand new, tags still attached. "I guess the sizes," he said, placing them on the back of a chair. Clara glanced at the coats, then at him. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." The words hung there heavier than they seemed. Later in the car, the city rolled by in the flashes of snow-dusted rooftops and slush-lined streets. The twins pressed their noses to the glass, pointing out buses and holiday lights. Clara sat between them in the back seat, her posture careful, as if proximity to Ethan might shift something she wasn't ready for. At the aquarium, Ethan paid for the tickets without comment. Inside, the soft blue glow of the tanks lit their faces. The twins ran ahead to press their palms against the glass, chasing the slow drift of jellyfish. Clara lingered a step behind, watching them, then catching Ethan, watching her. "They're beautiful," he said quietly, but it wasn't clear if he meant the jellyfish or the children. Midway through the visit, while Clara guided the twins toward the touch tank, Ethan stepped aside to answer a call. His voice dropped low. "I need everything you can find on the rental history of Clara Evans in the past 6 years and any legal records." He ended the call quickly, slipping his phone back into his coat before Clara turned around. When they left the aquarium, the late afternoon light was fading into the deep blue of an early winter evening. Back at the penthouse, Clara helped the twins out of their coats. Ethan watched from the doorway, a faint crease between his brows. "Clara," he said as she hung the coats by the door, "tomorrow let me take them to the park. Just for an hour. I want to know them." Her hands stilled on the coat rack. She looked at him for a long moment, weighing something unspoken. Then finally, 1 hour. Ethan nodded, a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. 1 hour. The park lay under a thin layer of snow, the kind that crunched softly underfoot. Ethan walked slowly, one hand in his coat pocket, the other holding his son's mittened hand. Clara kept pace on the other side, guiding their daughter, who was intent on spotting squirrels. The air was crisp, but the winter sun spilled gold across the frozen pond. Ethan stole a glance at Clara. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, her eyes fixed ahead. For a moment, it felt almost like the years between them had folded away. They stopped at a playground, its swings swaying gently in the breeze. The twins ran to climb the slide, their laughter ringing through the still air. Clara stood beside Ethan, hands in her pockets. "They don't know," she said quietly. Ethan turned. "About me." She nodded. "I never told them. I didn't want them to grow up wondering why their father wasn't there." A muscle tightened along his jaw. "I should have been there." "You couldn't have been," she replied, her voice low but steady. They made sure of that. Ethan's gaze dropped to the snowy ground. "I'm going to find out exactly who did what." That evening, while Clara put the twins to bed, Ethan sat at his desk with a manila folder open. Inside were rental histories, old forwarding addresses, and legal documents, evidence of a deliberate effort to erase Clara from his life. At the bottom was a name he recognized too well, Richard Cole, his uncle, and a senior board member in his company. Ethan's grip tightened on the papers. When Clara emerged from the twins' room, she found him still at the desk. "What are you looking at?" He slid the folder closed. "Nothing you need to see tonight." Her eyes lingered on him as if weighing whether to press, but she said nothing. The next day, Ethan invited Clara for coffee at a quiet cafe near the harbor. They sat by the window, the cold seeping in around the glass. "There's something I need to tell you," he began. "I think I know who forced you out of my life, and I'm not letting it happen again." Clara's hands tightened around her cup. "Ethan, no." He cut in, his voice calm but unyielding. "This time I'm not standing by. I'm going to deal with him." She studied him for a long moment, then said softly, "And what happens when the truth comes out about us? About them?" Ethan leaned forward, his eyes steady on hers. "Then the world will know exactly what I'm willing to fight for." The cafe's soft hum faded. When Ethan returned home that night, snowflakes clung to his coat as he stepped into the quiet penthouse. Clara was in the kitchen, rinsing dishes, her sleeves rolled to the elbows. She didn't look up when he entered. "I need to tell you something," he said, pulling off his gloves. Her hands stilled under the running water. "Go ahead." "It's Richard," Ethan continued. "He's the one who made you disappear from my life. He's been pulling strings since the day you left." Clara turned slowly, drying her hands with a pummel. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp. "And now he knows I'm back." Ethan hesitated. "He will soon." 2 days later, the call came. Clara answered the apartment phone while Ethan was out. A smooth, controlled voice greeted her. "Clara Evans, we finally speak again." Her grip tightened on the receiver. "What do you want?" "To remind you that your presence in Boston is temporary," Richard said. "Leave before this becomes ugly. I have resources you can't imagine." Clara's heart pounded, but her tone stayed level. "I'm not afraid of you." Richard chuckled. "Then you've forgotten how the world works. Ask yourself, can you protect them?" The line went dead. When Ethan returned, he found Clara standing by the window, the phone still in her hand. "Richard called," she said. Ethan's jaw set. Then it started, and I'm not letting him win this time. The following morning, Ethan walked into the boardroom of Coal Infrastructure, the city skyline glowing behind him. Richard was already there, leaning casually against the conference level. "You're letting sentiment cloud your judgment," Richard said before Ethan even sat down. "This," he gestured vaguely, "family situation is a liability. Step away and the board will forget it." Ethan's reply was calm, almost cold. "They're my children. She's the woman I love. I'm not stepping away from anything." A muscle ticked in Richard's jaw. "Then be ready for the consequences." That night, Clara found Ethan in his study, staring at a legal document. She moved closer, reading the heading, "Petition for Temporary Custody." "They're coming after us," she said quietly. "They're coming after me," Ethan corrected, his voice steady, "and they'll regret it." The next morning, Boston woke under a sky the color of steel. Clara stood at the kitchen counter, slicing apples for the twins' breakfast. The quiet hum of the heater filled the room. Ethan walked in, phone in hand, his expression carved from stone. "They're going public," he said without preamble. "Richard's called a press conference for tomorrow. He'll claim you're unfit, that I'm acting recklessly." Clara set the knife down, her fingers tightening around the counter's edge. "And the twins?" "They'll be part of his argument," Ethan replied, his voice low but firm, "which is why we get ahead of him." That afternoon, Ethan's lawyer, Marissa Grant, joined them in the study. She was direct, her gaze shifting between them. "If you want to win, you'll need to speak first. Control the narrative. Ethan, you address the board. Clara, you tell the press exactly what happened 6 years ago." Clara's shoulders stiffened. "You mean tell strangers how I was forced to leave? How I carried them alone while his family made sure he never knew?" Marissa's tone softened. "Yes, because if you don't, Richard will twist it until it's unrecognizable." Ethan stepped forward, resting a hand on Clara's. "You won't be alone up there." The next day, the Coal Infrastructure boardroom was packed. Cameras flashed beyond the glass walls as members filed in. Richard sat at the far end, his smile polite but sharp. Ethan stood at the head of the table. "Before we discuss projections or contracts, I need to make something clear. There's been speculation about my personal life. Let me end it now. I have 2 children, and I will protect them and their mother no matter what it costs this company or me personally. A ripple of whispers spread through the room. Richard's smile faltered. Meanwhile, in the lobby downstairs, Clara faced a wall of microphones. The twins were upstairs with a trusted friend. This moment was hers alone. She drew a breath. 6 years ago, I was in love with Ethan Cole. We planned a life together that ended when someone in his family made it clear if I stayed, they would destroy us both. I left thinking I was protecting him and our unborn children. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I'm here now because I won't run again. My children deserve their father, and we deserve to live without fear. The footage spread online within hours. Public opinion turned sharply. Hashtags calling for Richard's removal trended across platforms. That evening, Ethan and Clara sat in the living room, the twins asleep in the next room. Clara leaned back into the sofa, exhaustion etched into her face. You were right, she said quietly. We had to say it. Ethan reached over, taking her hand. We're not done yet, but now we're fighting on our terms. That evening, the city outside was a blur of headlights and falling snow. Inside the penthouse, Ethan stood by the window, watching the streets below. Clara entered quietly, carrying 2 mugs of tea. She placed one on the table. They're still talking about it, she said. It's everywhere. TV, online, even the school board called to check on the twins. Ethan turned, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. Good. The more people know, the harder it is for Richard to rewrite the story. The next morning, Ethan walked into the coal infrastructure headquarters. The tension in the air was palpable. Employees avoided eye contact. Conversations cut short as he passed. Richard was already in the boardroom. Leaning back in his chair like a man who still believed he was untouchable. You've stirred up quite the storm, Richard said with a smirk. But storms pass. Ethan placed a folder on the table and slid it across. Not when the storm carries proof. Inside were documents, financial irregularities, unauthorized transfers, and deals Richard had pushed through without the board's knowledge. Every page was a nail in the coffin. You think airing dirty laundry will save you? Richard's voice dropped, sharp as glass. I think, Ethan replied evenly, that the board will care more about a man stealing from them than about me protecting my family. By midday, the board voted. Richard was suspended pending investigation. The decision was unanimous. Outside, the winter sun was weak but steady. Ethan met Clara in the lobby, her expression cautious. It's over? She asked. For him? Yes, Ethan said. For us, it's a start. That weekend, they took the twins back to Tremont Street. The old bench was still there, dusted with snow. Clara sat down, running her hand over the cold metal. This is where everything changed, she murmured. Ethan sat beside her, slipping his hand into hers, and where it started again. The twins laughed nearby, their voices carrying over the hum of the city. The camera of life seemed to pull back. 4 figures framed against the endless movement of Boston. The past finally loosening its grip. Snowflakes began to fall again, but this time none of them felt the cold. The first days after Richard's removal felt strangely quiet. The board moved on. The headlines began to fade, but inside Ethan's world, there was a new kind of noise, a domestic hum he hadn't heard in years. In the mornings, the twins' laughter spilled down the penthouse hallway as they chased each other toward breakfast. Clara, hair tied back, moved easily through the kitchen. The space no longer felt like a glass box high above Boston, but like a place people lived. One evening after the children had gone to bed, Clara found Ethan in his study, looking over a set of architectural blueprints. You're working late, she said. Ethan closed the folder. Not really work, more ideas. He tapped the corner of the paper. A community housing project. Affordable, safe, and warm for families who've been where you were that night. Clara's eyes softened. You don't have to do this because of me. I'm doing it because I can, he replied, and because I should have been there 6 years ago. Weeks later, the first snowfall of the new year blanketed the city. The 4 of them stood outside a renovated brownstone in South Boston. Inside, freshly painted walls and sturdy heating waited for the first families to move in. A small group of reporters lingered, but Ethan kept his arm lightly around Clara's back, guiding her away from the cameras. This isn't about us, he murmured. It's about them. Still, when the twins darted past, giggling in the crisp air, a photographer caught the moment. Ethan smiling at Clara, her hand reaching instinctively for his. The image would quietly circulate online, not as a scandal, but as something rare. A story that ended well. That night, they walked home along Tremont Street. Snow clung to the benches and street lamps, but the cold no longer felt sharp. Clara paused at the bench where everything began. "We could have missed all of this," she said quietly. Ethan took her hand. "We almost did." For a long moment, they stood in silence as the city moved around them. The lights from the penthouse glimmered faintly in the distance, a reminder that their lives, though changed, were still unfolding. And for the first time in years, neither of them was looking back. And that's where their journey, born from a freezing night on a park bench, found its warmest ending. Thank you for staying with this story until the very last moment. Your time means everything to us. If this touched your heart, please like the video, subscribe, and join us tomorrow for another unforgettable story. See you in the next.